we will reconvene now for our next exciting session, which is on opportunities in the geopolitical landscape and enhancing strategic partnerships. So friends, please be in the hall right now, and I would request Mr. Mihir Bhatkamkar to kindly come on stage, and we would be starting the session immediately right now. Thank you all.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. This session brings into sharp focus one of the most powerful forces shaping global trade today. In a world where borders shift and policies and partnerships are forged through strategy, understanding geopolitical landscape isn't optional. It's not a dinner table conversation anymore. We are diving into the bold, complex terrain of opportunities, geopolitical landscape, and enhancing strategic partnerships, where every trade lane, tariff, and treaty carries the potential to redefine logistics. Get ready for a conversation that blends diplomacy, disruption, and decisive thinking, led by a panel of leaders who've navigated both boardrooms and bilateral boundaries. Moderating this high-stake dialogue is an industry veteran and a policy expert, Mr. Samir Shah. Mr. Samir Shah is our past chairman and a distinguished leader in logistics. He has 40+ years experience as a custom broker, but he is also a trainer at heart, a mentor, and a strategic thinker with a strong entrepreneurial spirit for dedicating to advancing the logistics education in India. Mr. Samir Shah has received numerous accolades, including the World Customs Certificate of Merit, and has actively contributed to the international industry forums and associations, making him an insightful moderator for discussing the impact of geopolitics on supply chain. I now request our distinguished panelists to join us on stage. Mr. Neeraj Ambani, Group President, Reliance Industries. Please, we'll have a round of applause for the speakers. Mr. Mikhail Goncharo, Secretary General, CCTT. Thank you. Can we have a round of applause, please? Mr. Dennis Bandura, Managing Director, BBC Chartering. Yes. Mr. Pritam Banerjee, Head WTO Studies, Ministry of Commerce. I'll also like to invite our Board of Advisor, our immediate past President, Chairman, Mr. Shankar Shinde on the stage, please.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, everyone. And I'm sorry for all the delays, but then we are in IST, Indian Stretchable Time. So we need to respect the fact that we work in Indian Stretchable Time. A few things. The app permits you to ask questions. And all my panelists would be very happy to answer questions. So you could post them, and somebody will ensure that the questions are sent to me, and we'll try and answer your questions. We also have, I was just told as I was coming up, that we might have to have a small interlude of about 10 minutes, because the present chairman of the World Customs Organization wants to address this conference, and his time might come within our session, which we will have to respect, even though we are not very happy about it. But the whole scheduling has gone a bit wrong, so we will be doing that. So please ask questions. I have a wonderful panel, very varied, very different experiences, and come from very different backgrounds. The topic, of course, is something that we all want to talk about over the last few months, geopolitical. But when you actually try to find the dictionary meaning of geopolitical, it's very simple. You know, it is very international relations as influenced by geographical factors. But then the buzzword has changed its meaning on its own, possibly thanks to COVID, thanks to the wars that have started affecting India. the world has always been at war over the last 2,000 years. But then it all depended on which part of the geography there was an unrest and which part of the geographies got affected. India having been affected in the recent past, so we are all talking geopolitical. The Suez Canal problems, the USA tariffs, the political upheaval in our regions, old friends turning foes and old foes continuing their antics, neutrality of countries getting a new dimension have all changed our perspective of geopolitical. The oscillating shift between globalization to glocalization to localization and national priorities with very strong sentiments fueled by an unrelenting and often far away from reality social media does confuse all of us. At the smallest provocation, the expectations that we have from each other keep changing, and the idea of common good, not at the cost of one's own good, has gone for a toss. Like over the last 60, 70 years after World War II, while we had a lot of undercurrents, the concept of common good always prevailed. But in the recent past, we see that that is also going out. We are also in a world where there is too much interdependence for both finished and unfinished goods. Multiple origin goods being assembled in a third country is become very common. To add to that, the multiple free trade agreements, the bilateral ones, the multilateral ones, the regional ones, and deviations in small manner from the established rules of origin, they all really confuse you, and compliance has become a very big issue. So one is unable to forecast what is going to happen, and then comes the expectation that the forwarder will hold it all for everyone. Expectations from us in terms of legal compliances, solutions for an uninterrupted supply, as well as our ability to guide on alternates in routes, in supply, in compliances, are sometimes very unrealistic. The pressure on the trader is forcing him to pass on all his troubles to us. And the competition amongst us is helping him do that. So we are in an area where there are a lot of challenges, but the job of this panel is to talk about the opportunities. I have a wonderful panel with me. We have a few presentations, we have a few people talking, but all my 4 panelists would love to take questions and to try and make it as interactive as possible. So let's hope we can give you a wonderful 1 hour and you all benefit out of the wisdom of my 4 panelists. So I'd like to start first with Neeraj Bhai. Neeraj Bhai, thank you.
What I wanted to really cover is more from a shipper perspective. And so I won't really run the presentation, but I'll just try to speak. Try to be brief because we have lots of speakers. So, really focusing a little bit on more my perspective. So, firstly, what I wanted to first talk about is the fact that, everybody talks of India 2047. And when you look at the growth of India, I think what is very important is everybody looks at the top line, which is the fact that we will reach a 4 billion, 5 billion, 25 billion kind of trillion number. And everybody does look at that. But I think what really matters to us is the fact that when Vision 2047 happens, and when we reach the $26 trillion number, the your logistics market by that time would be $1.5 trillion. So we are talking of going from around nearly 380 to 400 billion to 1.5 trillion. And that is a fairly large growth. That means if you look at that logistics market at that point of time, would be larger than some economies. And that is the scale of what this industry will have to really handle and also really, look at it. But when you really look at the details of that, what is really important is the components of that, right? So if I look at the components of the industry, it is very important that, everybody talks of two aspects, and I think I wanted to focus on both elements. One is the modal mix. So modal mix, India has always been a very, very high focus on road transportation. Rail has increased, but if you look at it actually from independence, rail at some point decreased actually. But with the kind of focus under the PM Gati Shakti, as well as the focus of the infrastructure over the last like 2 terms, and now the 3rd term of the current government, we have seen a very, very high focus on all infrastructure development across all areas. And therefore, if you just take a very, very nearby target of 2033, what we are really looking at is that road will still be a 70-71% share, but railways is likely to go up to a very high tonnage and by a high capacity, and therefore from a percentage it may look 18%, but we have to look at it as 18% of the larger number. And that's a very, very high CAGR growth which will happen in that kind of period of time. We are also looking at the fact that, we've just heard earlier about the port expansions, and but the fact that when you look at coastal, when you look at import-export put together, we are talking of seaways and waterways really going to around 9%. So that's a very large number. What is very, very important is interesting initiatives. We've always been discussing in our industry about the fact that cabotage is not there in a very, very large manner. But if you look at the way the government has started speaking to international shipping lines, I mean, it's very noticeable was the announcement of CMA to do Indian flagged vessels on the coast, by which now you will actually have actual cabotage which will actually take place, or the fact that you'll use international ships for coastal movements. Now this substantially will cut the cost of coastal. So you're really going to see a huge improvement in the way that happens. Airways will remain always a niche area of 2%. But if you look at the other way around, which is the service type, I think that is also very, very important, that freight transport will actually come down to around 51%, which is actually currently higher. Warehousing is actually growing to around 20%. Value-added services, 15%. So if you take warehousing and value-added services put together, you're talking about 35% of that spend, which we were just discussing, to be only warehousing and value-added services. If you look at express and parcel and e-com put together, that itself could become 14%. So you're really seeing quite a shift away from traditional transport to multiple modes. You're seeing away from traditional transport-related freight to multiple. But what is this takeaway for the industry which you're representing? The fact that today, and this is something I was just speaking on the sidelines, when I was seeing the presentations, one thing which I said yesterday, and I'm again trying to repeat, is that earlier supply chain itself never got a board level seat in terms of the strategy of a company. Same way now, at least when we are looking at it in our organization and when we look at planning, we involve our partners to decide whether we are doing the right process, whether we are doing the right documentation at the planning stage. And therefore, I really believe that the forwarding community should equally play a role in the planning itself rather than only the execution. And therefore, I'm referring to, the entire focus always being on execution. Also, same way, the focus should be on the value addition. So I think this is a interesting change, which I think can impact the entire logistics community, but definitely the import-export. When we look at value addition, you're having a whole lot of different processes which will come up in FTWZ, in bonded, etc. These are actually where actually the forwarding community can get into. So when you look at, so this is one part. The second part, which I feel from a geopolitical point of view, which actually is the point which I am seeing, is overall, we talk of all the tensions, but what is the underlying factor in these tensions? The fact that there was a global order post-World War II, there was a whole concept that there will be a common rule which will govern common trade. And that is really how, the whole mechanism worked for so much time. But that is completely changing, where other countries have now started looking at FTAs as the biggest factor, right? And therefore, if you look at India, India has also moved in that direction in terms of FTAs. And I think that is very, very important for all of us in the import-export area to really look at that. Which are the countries where India is focusing on? Which are the industries we are focusing on in that? Like if you look at today, India has 15 to 20 FTAs, though I'm not the right expert, I think that will be covered later. But if you look at comparatively, like other countries have increased and have much higher number of FTAs. We are going in that direction, and I think that will be covered by a fellow speaker. But where it impacts us from a logistics is, I think it is very, very important for us to try to see where FTAs are, where shipping capacities. So at least internally, what I at least try to now start looking at is that, okay, fine, if there is a FTA, do we have those kind of shipping capacities? And I remember speaking to, in fact, coincidentally, I initiated that conversation 2 years back at the Chennai Triple FAI, where I was telling large shipping lines, I said is, you have networks, but you are actually not connecting the south to south in a big way. And I had mentioned that last time also. And therefore, on one side, while we have a FTA, we don't have a actually cost-effective connectivity to connect those two ports or those two countries through a capacity which is cost-effective. I'm very glad to see how the government is actually focused, saying that yes, we need to increase this capacity, we need to do it. But the entire community, in all of us, also need to go back to whether it's Indian or international shipping lines, whether it is the feeder operators, to actually try to say how do we really increase that capacity. So the FTAs need to match with that capacity. And I think that is something which is a direction which is, going in that direction. If you look at what the, so I'm going to be a little brief because we'd rather have more time for the Q&A. If I look at what are therefore the impact on the community and what we really need to do collectively, I think one aspect which really comes in is the fact that with the kind of huge GDP growth, with the fact that you're going to see a massive increase in import-export, all our business on a good note is going to grow. So that's a real positive of it. It is also going to be focused, as I said, where the FTAs are there, those businesses will grow. So those lanes will grow, that becomes a very, very focused approach. So that is one aspect. But the other aspect is the value addition part, and really where does the community really come in to say that, okay, fine, are we really going down to understand the business process of our customers? Are we trying to see where the customer needs handholding? Because if we have this kind of high growth, the growth has to also increase in mid-size importer-exporters. It cannot be only the larger importer-exporters. And that is the area where handholding will be required, where every exporter or importer may not understand the processes of value addition. When I say value addition, it could be packing, it could be documentation, it could be a whole lot of aspects. Yes, the global system is digitizing, but it is really important that, we play that role collectively as shippers and forwarders to see how do we actually standardize those processes by different categories so that each category gets a boost, whether it's handicrafts, whether it is textiles, whether it is, industrial products. Really looking at that and then looking at our digital platforms, whether it is within your company or within with working with IceGate, working with ULIP to try to see how do we really standardize that and digitize that. I think everybody talks of AI. I think as we were offline also discussing yesterday in terms of how it can be implemented. But I would really, something which at least I am looking at in my organization is the agentic AI. Meaning trying to see that, okay, fine, if, like say, for example, if I'm doing a documents, then my documents are going to be inspected by an officer or the customs system. Can I create a agentic AI system in mind by which when I'm saving my documents, itself it is looking at the eyes of a customs officer, taking all the rules which came up to yesterday, which a human being may or may or not be able to understand, and actually say, okay, these are the flaws in the document so that it's always a first time right. So that is the kind of aspect. So what are those tools which can help your operating team to help the customers? So that is going to be an interesting area. Another aspect which I feel is this entire aspect of sustainability. I think is what we are starting to realize, I mean, is that every country is going to have more increasing requirements in terms of specifications of the packaging, a lot of other aspects. And this is something, again, we'll have to be wary of as import-exporters as well as, forwarders. In terms of that, are we designing the value addition, the packing, the, prior to stuffing, in the way which is meeting the local regulations of each country? This is only becoming more and more complex, and I think is I'm just giving an example. I was attending one of our GPCA supply chain events, and I didn't realize that the level of the plastic waste discussion has led to pallets, and how much pallets will be allowed in the future to go from one country to the other. But there is actually no option. So there is obviously representations being made. But I was actually very surprised that even this conversation was there. So this is a very, very interesting element. I think is what I would want to last end by is that what is it that geopolitics means for us, right? I think one, as I said, is the fact that trade will be very focused, very trade lane specific. Two is that we will need to work with the carriers, whether it's the sea or the air, to try to ensure that that growth which is planned under the FTAs is matched with the capacity in that lane. Third is obviously making it cost effective. And the last is the value addition for the categories which are going to be on focus. Because as you grow to this kind of size of the economy, size of trade, there will be a more specialization required for each subcategory or each category. And that is where a community really comes in to say, yes, this is how we are going to handle the mid-size and larger enterprise. I would also want to say one thing, that it is very, very important that you are seeing also a very interesting change which is happening, which is that shipping lines have, which were largely only focusing on the port-to-port activities, coming into the land activities. And therefore, they are directly now going as integrated forwarding companies. So that is one aspect which is changing. Another one which is changing, which I'm noticing now, is a lot of platform-based forwarding companies are coming. That means who are looking at saying that we can allow a mid-size shipper to come in and do booking directly at a very affordable rate, which is comparable to the larger shippers' rates. And that actually has a fundamental impact on the way the revenue model will work for a forwarder, right? Because if you strip off the freight, then what is the impact? So this is a very, very interesting change which is now coming to play. And I think something which we need to be careful of and see how it impacts positively as well as, in a difficult manner. So that's it from my side. Thank you.
Thank you, Neeraj bhai. And thank you for being so positive about India's future and also talking about the importance of us being part of the board and drawing our attention to the innovation that our suppliers are going to come in as competitors. I'm sorry about it. We also have the theme as Global Logistics Confluence, and it's so heartening to see that we have Belgium, Japan, Turkey, Thailand, UAE, all right over here. So we continue with the session, and we have our man from Moscow, Mr. Mikhail. Can we have a round of applause for him, please?
Once again, dear ladies and gentlemen, it's my honor and pleasure to welcome you on behalf of the International Coordinating Council for Trans-Eurasian Transportation, CCTT. We are a Swiss-registered international transport association with the largest office in Moscow for the simple reason that the organization was founded 30 years ago with the primary goal to develop a corridor between East and West at that time, using primarily landlines. Today we have more than 80 members from 20 countries. Just to give you a glimpse of who the members are, I see DP World's print materials on the tables. DP World joined us last year. We're very grateful for that. In this hall, we may have representative of Russian transit company. Transit здесь у нас? Over there. Or Mr. Berzinch of RTSB, a German company who has been our expert and friend over here, just to give you a geographic flavor. We're very honored to be in association with FFFAA, and I want to really thank Mr. Shinde, Mr. Mulani, and Mr. Bharat for this continuing effort together. Today, I would like to just say that our organization includes all participants in international transport business. National railways, sea and dry ports, stevedores, transport and logistical companies. Also governmental officials are part of our organization, as well as academia. This allows us to really do good advocacy for transport solutions in many, many countries. We attach particular importance to further developing our ties with India. I don't want to repeat what was said here. I don't want to repeat all good figures. Let me just say that on behalf of all our members, we consider India one of the most important markets in economy and in logistics. I would also like to be a little bit philosophical and to return to what Mr. Shinde said in his address yesterday. The role of logistics is changing. It has changed. And in today's world of unfortunately, more uncertainty and ambiguity than yesterday, we see the increasing role of logistics not only, as Shankar put it, a back office or additional costs. In our opinion, logistics is now more and more forming the economy in terms of inspiring manufacturers to develop their products. This is a tremendous global shift, and in it, with addition of artificial intellect and big data, in our opinion, the role of logistics will still grow. So my congratulations to all of you representing this important industry, which we are also a part of. I would like to, just a sec. Yep. I'll skip some of these slides. Just to give you a flavor, India's global and container market is constantly growing, and we are very, very happy to see this process. As you know, global geopolitical shifts are redrawing trade routes, and the global container market now, its volume in 25 is estimated at 191 million TEUs. This creates new strategic opportunities for India as a logistics and transshipment hub in the Trans-Eurasian transportation system. We have a record-breaking Russia-India trade turnover. Last year, the trade turnover increased by 9.2% and amounted 70.6 billion, becoming the maximum in the modern history, frankly speaking. Russia remains the fourth major trading partner of India today. Last year, Russia compared supplies was 65.7 billion worth of goods to the Indian market. At the same time, the Indian exports to Russia grew only by 21%, amounting to only 4.9 billion. Looking at the trends in the trade between India and Russia, we may note that unfortunately one of the main hurdles on our way is the backload. So I will skip further explanations, but what we discussed with FFAA may be addressing you, freight forwarders. We should think about a new role or remember the important role of freight forwarders of hunting for cargo. In fact, in our opinion, this could bring immediate benefits both to you, the participants, and to actually cover this gap of almost 70% of void load going from south to north. I would like to know that many of our members from Russia are very active in the Indian market. I already mentioned Transit Company. They will have their presentation tomorrow. I cannot but mention FESCO Company, which in 2023 opened an Indian line West FIL Way. It's a direct sea line from the Indian ports of Nhava Sheva and Mundra to Novorossiysk through Suez Channel. Skipping some more explanations, I would like to concentrate briefly on North-South International Transport Corridor. As you know, this corridor is of strategic importance to many transport players and to many countries, including India. Despite serious competition with deep sea, container transportation in the North-South corridor in connection through Iran is also showing a steady growth. The main increase in the volume of container transportation by ITC to Iran, for instance, is increased more than 3 times last year. Just a sec. You can see the cargo flow forecast here. Over the past 2 years, the rolling out of the container in the services, for instance, by RGD Logistics, one of our members as well, tripled down in terms of the time of transportation from 40 days to 12 or 14 days. And this process still continues. The main classification of transportation and goods through the North-South corridor is, of course, food, agricultural products, coal, and mineral fertilizers now. In order to be practical here in terms of solutions, what we need to do more to increase the flow over the North-South corridor, let me say that in our opinion, and I'm talking here on behalf of all our 80 members, first and foremost, what we need to do is to establish a comprehensive assessment of transportation costs all the way to end users. This would allow to create full transparency and predictability of the service, end-to-end rates for our customers, which would include infrastructure tariff, loaded and empty runs, additional fees, including those related to transshipment, custom clearance, loading and unloading operations. So I am, well, hesitant to use the words common tariff, but this is exactly what we mean. A corridor cannot operate without a common tariff. And by the way, a corridor is not something that you can just manage or administer. A corridor is something that attracts business. And let's keep thinking about this in all our further moves. Secondly, a formation of a network of hub transport and logistical hubs in the ITC route, performing the functions of accumulation, processing, and distribution of cargo. This business, as we see it, could be commercially viable. It could generate material effects for private and public entities. So in our proposals, which you can see on the website of CCTT, we're definitely urging for private-public partnership in this particular sphere. Thirdly, an introduction of digital technologies through electronic trading platforms. Today, Mr. Tagut, in his speech, mentioned already the importance of IT approach. I can only second that move. We are working with our partners on such platforms, and we also already see the results. The main problem today, as we see it, is that many countries and many companies have their own platforms. What do we do to unite them or to find interaction with them or between them is an issue. But let's just take it. Without such an interaction and coordination, digital service throughout the corridor will not work. In the future, the goal should be to introduce a common trade and logistical platform for this corridor. I'm again hesitant to say anything like common operator, but a common function that would operate the corridor in the interests of all participants is something that I think is needed. Along these lines, we've been discussing with our Indian partners an idea of creating what we call a Eurasian operational platform, which will unite not only our traditional players, freight forwarders, logistic operators, but also probably cargo owners and manufacturers. So this idea is in the making, and of course, I will invite all of you to participate. Once again, to make a corridor operational, what we need in the ideal world is common tariff, consistent en route schedule, seamless operations and AI solutions, of course, safety, security, something I did not mention, but I will just mention briefly. Financing services, comprehensive financing services, not only payment, but also loans and insurance combined. Probably trading functions with finding backload, including freight owners, and of course unified regulations, which goes a little bit beyond our practice today for this platform, but we're actively working with the governments en route to also ensure that we have at least common understanding of the rules which are implied over the corridor. With this, I think I should stop. Once again, thanking FFA for inviting us over. We would like to continue, of course, this partnership. And I only want to say that we, to reciprocate, of course, we are inviting FFA and all the members to visit some of our major events in the countries who are participants, in Kazakhstan, in Belarus primarily. Next year, one of the biggest events in Eurasia, Trans-Russia in March, could accommodate a combined logistical and business mission from India. And dear Mr. Shankar, we will continue to talk about this. Everyone is welcome. Just wearing my Russian hat, I cannot but remember from my childhood a very good phrase that my parents used to repeat. I didn't quite understand what was that time. But then I'm very pleased to remind you of this slogan, which I think is very actual and applicable today in terms of India-Russia relations. The slogan is Hindi Rusi Bhai Bhai. With this, I thank you very much and continue, please continue on with our cooperation. Thank you.
That was wonderful, and I'd like Dushyant and Amit Kamath to think about the invitation that he has given us for March of 26. Our next speaker is somebody for whom we already have a question, Ms. Dr. Banerjee. And the question is that, given this uncertainty, how do you see WTO still remaining relevant? If you could, along with your presentation, touch that also.
A very good afternoon to all of you. I'll try to be as brief and efficient as possible because I know, we are between lunch and you. And just want to put a disclaimer that some of the things I'll be saying over here are my personal views and not that of my employer. What I will try and do, of course, answer that question as well, but give you a background of how we have reached to the point of crisis that we are in currently right now, and what is broadly India's strategy, right, going forward with respect to FTAs and other areas to find some certainty for our businesses in this very uncertain world. So, to answer the question, perhaps I'll go to the end because that's more relevant. But if I can have the slides up here, please. And of course, a very big thank you to FAI, to Samir ji and to Dushyant ji for having me over here. So while the slides are being put up, I will go straight into the storyline in the interest of time. I think the one thing we need to understand is that what is happening now is actually a return to normal. For most of recent modern history in 20th century, there's always been geopolitics and trade intertwined to each other. Whether it was the two world wars or the Cold War that followed, the economy and the geopolitics were intertwined. They were not separate, and there were multiple crises. What happened starting the 1970s was that you had the United States really start growing economically very, very fast and pulling away. And the geopolitical competition between Soviet Union and the US tilted very heavily on favor of the US. In 1990, the Cold War ended, and for the first time in known history, you had one single country which was economically and politically completely dominant. So in that period between 1920 and 2010, those 20 years are somewhat unique in world history, that one country could drive reforms and changes that it saw was important for the world, and that led to this so-called rules-based trading order that we refer to as the WTO. It was an outcome of a very unique moment in history where one country had that ability to push through many things. Now, what has happened in that in the 20 years that stability remained, but subsequently things have changed. So slides are not yet up. I don't know what the reason behind that is. But what starts happening really from around, pardon me? Okay.
Mihir, त्यांचं presentation.
You can speak, Alan.
Okay, so essentially what happens is that another unique moment in history comes because in 2000, what the United States does is that it facilitates the entry of China into the WTO. This is also a unique moment because typically a country which sees another country as its future prospective competitor does not facilitate its entry and ability to grow faster. But there were certain perceptions that have not come to fruition, but it was felt that the integration of China into the rules-based trading system would actually benefit everyone. But what that enabled to happen was that China initially was growing very, very fast, but it was growing largely in the labor-intensive sectors of the global economy, and also in the assembly kind of functions. And it was really eating into market share and growth prospects of other developing countries. So up to 2010, there was not really much of competition between China and the advanced industrialized economies. 2010 onwards, that changes as China, first the global financial crisis happens, and then we see China moving into the more advanced technology intensive sectors, which then has changed this 20 years of relative geopolitical peace, which we have taken as a normal, which it isn't. It's just a 20-year interlude from what is actually the normal. So there were initial responses from countries like the US was more rules-based in that sense, that you had during President Obama's time, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which was a trade agreement that was meant to have everybody but China, every other Asian economy and China, and the so-called pivot to Asia, which was the geopolitical part of that move. But down the line during President Trump's first administration, you had the initiation of the geopolitical trade wars with China, which is now matured. What is important for us to remember is that this is a bipartisan decision in the US. It's not related to politics. The trade policy actions that were taken by President Trump during his first term were not changed by President Biden. Those tariffs were kept in place. And India was one of the beneficiaries. Because of those tariffs, we saw some industries moving to India. Of course, the pandemic itself was also a major disruptor, in the sense that the supply chain disruptions during the pandemic made a lot of firms, not just countries and governments, realize that over-dependence in one source of supply can be a fatal challenge for supply chains in the future. Disruptions can be very, very disruptive for that reason. So China +1 and all of that has happened. So this crisis that we see has been long in the making. It's not that has just come about. So, I wish I had the slides up to show you the biggest problem that we are facing right now is that one country, and this is not to single out one country in that sense, but just evidence-based. One country China went from having just about 3% share of global manufacturing to about 28% share of global manufacturing in just 25 years. That's a hugely disruptive change in market share by one single country that obviously impacts employment, economic prospects for many other countries. The other big challenge is, and again I wish I had the slides to show you, that up to around the early 2000s, China's exports and imports were more or less the same. They were, in the sense, what they were earning from the world by selling to the world, they were spending to buy things from the rest of the world as well, which is balanced. Because if China's income from rest of the world is then again spent outside, it creates opportunities for every other country. But around 2003 to 4, that those lines starts to diverge. What you have is exports really ballooning up, but imports not going up so much. The other statistics I want to leave you with is total capital spending. If I take China's total share of capital spending per year, it's around 28 to 29% of the world, but its consumption is just 13%. So that's another anomaly, right? So because you have a country which is essentially an investment-led economy, but it again consumes very little. So it's not buying from the world, selling a lot to the world, it has deficits with every other major economy, and that was bound to disturb the system and lead to a crisis. The crisis we see and the reaction we see, it's become a global reaction with the reciprocal tariffs, etc., but it is triggered by this imbalance, global imbalance that was created by this massive, unprecedented rise of China as an economic power and as an exporting behemoth. So the question then that we have to ask is that now, because the rules-based order into which China was brought into, which is the WTO, many countries started feeling that that is not adept enough to manage the challenge the system has thrown up. That could have been, countries could have found a gradual solution, but what we have seen since January of this year is a more radical intervention to change that status quo. And it has now completely challenged the rules-based trading order. So that leads to the question what the WTO is doing. The WTO is still relevant. It is still the repository of the rules that govern world trade. It will meet next year for its next ministerial conference. And if you are, if you have been following what the discussion has been, the priorities have been, it is precisely this issue. How does one deal with this global imbalance? How can global growth and trade be more equitable so all countries see a benefit and therefore have a stake in the system? That is the #1 agenda of discussion for the WTO. One hopes that the ministerial conference, which is the apex, the body of the WTO, will come up with some solutions. But till then, I like to shift gears quickly and talk about what has been India's strategy in this context. Now, where obviously our government and our industry was slowly getting the understanding that we are moving into uncertain times, right? And this was starting right from after 2014-15 when all of these developments were happening. So the strategy has been that we enter into free trade agreements with all the global major economies. If you see the basket of FTAs that India already has in place or is currently negotiating, it covers all the large industrial big economies. You have Japan, Korea, Australia, you have the ASEAN member states, you have, in the Gulf it has started with the UAE, but others will soon follow. You have UK, EU, and of course US is going on. So essentially, if I look at the set of partners with which India is currently negotiating or has FTAs with, they cover 80 to 85% of global trade. The future emerging markets like Southern Africa, etc., Latin America are also in the plans for an FTA. Why that is important? Because like many other countries, India also perceives China as a big challenge for this industry. So what does the FTA do? It does 4 things. The binding commitments on tariffs of an FTA ensures that the businesses have certainty about market access to your major markets. But even more importantly, India's own MFN tariffs are quite high, which means if I want to integrate my value chains with my key suppliers, and I am importing intermediates to manufacture, costs of that also go up. So I can choose my partner and products in an FTA and reduce those tariffs to ensure that my own manufacturing becomes more competitive. And these are binding commitments, so you have certainty. When you have that certainty, businesses are willing to invest. So FDI follows FTAs because you have created that certainty. The third thing it does is that it not only looks at tariffs and goods, but it also looks at services and non-tariff barriers. Non-tariff barriers are increasingly more important, and they will require specific solutions product-wise. And FTAs provide some avenues for doing that. We have not been so good at doing it so far, but things are changing on that also. Services is also equally important. Digitally delivered services are going to create millions of jobs. The GCCs, the global capability centers that you see, and India is one of the biggest players in that, is going to power India's next middle-class revolution. For people who are of my age, we saw the cities of Gurgaon, Pune, Noida, all of these cities come up and create this whole middle-class revolution, fueled largely by the IT and IT-enabled sector. This next one, powered by AI and digital, leveraging Indian demographics, is going to be 3 to 4 times that if we can play our cards right. So that's another thing that the FTAs offer. Last but not the least, what the FTAs offer us is that we can choose to keep out some of our priority sectors out of that FTA negotiation. to provide them at least temporary relief from competition so they can grow economies of scale before they are exposed to global competition. But the subtle thing that you must take away is that we were in RCEP, which included China, but we walked out of that. And we will, of course, in the foreseeable future, not get into a negotiation for an FTA with China, which means my so-called MFN tariffs, because I have reduced my tariffs using FTAs with all my major partners, essentially becomes largely meant for Chinese imports, which gives me much greater flexibility to use those MFN tariffs to protect my industry as I see strategically fit to do. But what does all of this mean for all of you in the freight forwarding industry? As more and more of my trade becomes governed by FTAs, there are three things that will become important. Number one, rules of origin. Rules of origin under every FTA, and please also, if you've been following the news coming out of US and EU, even they are pushing for very, very hard rules of origin because they want to create supply chains and exclude certain countries, etc. So you are going to enter a world which is defined by FTAs, bilateral deals, and complicated rules of origin, and you will have the frontline role to help industry navigate this. It will also require much more digital solutions, the kind that we have seen under the India-Korea FTA, where rules of origin certificates, etc., need to move into digital solutions, even AI, blockchain. Otherwise, you will not be able to handle these problems. The third thing that you have to keep in mind with respect to FTAs is that you will have increasingly dependence on compliance with rules that are not purely related to customs. So, all your partner government agency related standard rules, because if you have these mutual recognition agreements of standards and certifications, they are going to be also part of the entire clearance process. So better understanding of how these works, how to facilitate them, and again, use of digital technologies to make it much more facilitative. Last but not the least, and this is a huge conundrum, and this is something that our Honorable Minister talks about, many other people talk about, is that when we sign FTAs, our partner countries, whichever that partner country is, they have a very high utilization rate. What is an utilization rate? That is essentially the fact that exporters from that country use the FTA benefits to access India's markets at zero or reduced duties. The reverse is often not true. We often see that though Indian exporters have earned the privilege through an FTA to export at a much reduced duty, we are not utilizing that so much. And there might be different reasons for that, but what I personally feel one of the biggest reasons is one, lack of awareness, especially amongst our smaller exporters, of how to get that done, how to use the FTA's benefits. Second, they're often deterred by the complexity of the documentation, whether it's getting rules of origin certificate or others. I think there this community has a huge role to play, because our exporters are missing out on getting the benefits of these FTAs, and since this community is the interface between understanding the rules that govern cross-border trade, whether it's rules of origin, other kind of documentation that will give them those privileges, you have a very important role to play in taking the idea of the FTA and socializing it, especially among the MSMEs who otherwise might be either unaware or might be deterred by the complexity of documentation, etc. So I'll stop there, and I'll take more questions. I wish my PPT could have been run, but I think I'll take any questions that you would have. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And with your permission, we will circulate your PPT. My apologies, but I'm sure you understand it was not in the hands of FFAI. Could we have a round of applause for him, please? And also a round of applause for all of you for being so patient and giving my panelists the due respect. Could I request Mr. Danish to please come up?
Good afternoon, everyone. I'll try to keep it shorter.
Thank you very much, first of all, for extending the invitation to be a speaker here. This beautiful panel, that's really impressive. That's a lot of good things discussed. That's good for industry, good for forwarding, of course, of India and, you know, us who serve the industry and be with you. We have, let me just say a few words. I represent the shipping company. I'm from the carrier side. I will try to offer you the view from the shipping line, what the geopolitics play to us and how we react to it. We are the MPP heavy lift carrier, the one that carries the big awkward lifts. I'm sure you're all aware of it. We represent quite a big portion of the MPP segment in the world, so I would say the biggest, but one of the, let's say, the one of the biggest carriers in this segment. So let's put it this way, we know a thing or two about the world geopolitics and how it's developing and so on. I'd like to, first of all, sort of agree with Dr. Pritam and add something. I do remember end of 90s and beginning of 2000s, there was some, within the social sides, there was some element of notion saying that geopolitics is over. We are in a world of relative stability and rules that would stay and we would kind of move on, which fortunately or unfortunately humanity has proven wrong. So we are still dependent on geopolitics and the associated with it problems. But my angle, what I was thinking, Dr. Pritam, I wanted to say that when you're in shipping, when you're in the logistics and especially us in the ocean transportation, you sort of always live in the world of instability and especially geopolitics. Like you kind of never forget where you are. Especially my office here in Dubai, we deal with the Middle East and Africa and India, and this corner, as you all know, have not been the most stable corner in the world, so we've been actively in it. Beginning from Iraqi war in 2003 through infamous Somalian piracy until the latest development of the closure of Red Sea, the Houthis and instability, and the 2025 being the tariff year. All of it have been just teaching us one thing, that geopolitics are here, we got to pay attention to it, we need to be resilient and flexible and know what it's all about. All of us know that all of us know that the problems with the geopolitics, the challenges, we've been in the industry, know what it is to change the destination, change the way we deal with the waiting for 30 days in COVID times in the port, to finding the private security companies to go through the piracy areas, and so on and so on. And all of it, of course, teaches us one thing, that it's highly, highly unstable and highly unpredictable world. So you cannot, unfortunately, plan anything for next 6 months because you keep being surprised all the time. But in name of our conference, especially our panel, there was also the word opportunities in it. I just wanted to give you one of the examples that I was thinking when I was sitting there. The Red Sea, all of us, at least in MPP, have changed it to the Cape. And at the beginning, we were quite worried about what we do now, because the Indian originated cargoes that were going to, say, US Gulf or Canadian or even North Coast South America, they were always combined with the European, Mediterranean and continent cargoes. Suddenly, you can't combine them. You need to think of something else. And with the time, we could see how, especially Indian-originated cargoes that were destined to Africa, suddenly a good combination with America. And when we started looking into it more closely, we've discovered the whole world of new combinations and new things you can do. So in a sense, this is also opportunity. I don't know, I mean, it's probably hard to morally say about looking for opportunity where the problem comes in, but you know, there is always the side of it. If you stay flexible, if you stay resilient and attentive to things, you can basically make it happen. What we've seen through different kind of issues that we've had lately, of course, being a carrier, you can imagine we're the last point in the line from the producer to the EPC and the forwarder, and then only us come. So you can imagine us saying, no, it's going to cost you this much, will never be liked or received well. And that's the challenge that we've seen. We try to explain to the industry that it's not us who are inventing these things, but it's been somehow not always easy. But I have to say, with the time, with the experience that also forwarders and then soon the shippers and everyone in the industry have been having through these whole times, actually working out now. We've had fantastic cooperation with the Indian freight forwarders, with the international freight forwarders, even with EPCs, wherever we contract them directly or anything. You need to stay open and transparent, and then customers and client who rely on you, on the deliveries, on transit times and everything, they will basically listen. So if you want, this is another kind of opportunity that you get closer to the clients, you can closer to the market, and you know, be honest and transparent with them. So that's it's another interesting way to look at it. But just as a closing, just to really keep it short, India has been in a very, very unique and powerful position here when we talk geopolitics, or even the position and geographical position in the world. India is definitely soon to be absolute leader in the Asian side of the world production and logistics, so we believe in it. We will be always here. Again, thank you very much for listening. I would be happy to, if we have some time, to maybe engage in some question answers. But that's just the ocean take on the geopolitics changes in the world. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Denis. We do have a few questions, but for want of time, I'd request the people who've sent the questions to approach the panelists offline and take them. Could I request Shankar to please help us close the session?
Thank you, Samir Bhai, for opening the session with the introduction and the setting up the tone for the session. I would not like to come between the lunch and because you know I again want to meet everyone during the lunch, so apology. I think so. We have heard a lot during this session, and most of the important on the geopolitical aspects where the TFA plays the role, where Dr. Banerjee has given the complete details on the TFA and the importance of rules of origin and how to explore the opportunities and the potentiality. So that is a way forward where we see. And we also have Mr. Mikhail, who gave the international perspective with the connectivity of the cross borders with the safety security aspects, how important role the India has with the geostrategic positioning India, and we should work on these opportunities. So again, we had the different perspective from the team. So I would just like to close on this session, because we'll have the speakers of the dais also to discuss and take it forward. So once again, thanks, and a big round of applause for the speakers, the panelists over here. Thank you. And we would now request Mihir to take over for the felicitation. Thank you.
Thank you. I think it was a power-packed session with everything coming together. There were some challenges, but I think that's logistics and supply chain. Now I'd like to invite Mr. Samir Shah to felicitate our panelists. We'll start with Mr. Mikhail Goncharo. Thank you, Mr. Mikhail. Next, we'll like to felicitate Mr. Dennis Bandura. Thank you, Mr. Dennis. Now we'd like to felicitate Dr. Pritam Banerjee. Now I'll like to request our Board of Advisor, our IPC, Mr. Shankar Shinde, to felicitate Mr. Samir Shah for a fabulous job. I think there were some ups and downs and he took us through those waves and kept the audience engaging. Thank you. Mr. Shankar, we'll also felicitate our sponsors. First, we'll go with our business session sponsor, Continental Carriers. We have Mr. Vip. Yes, sir, Mr. Vipin. Thank you, Mr. Vipin. We'll also like to felicitate our lunch sponsors, whom we'll soon relish. Deen Dayal Port Authority. I think Mr. Dinesh ji, for Deen Dayal Port Authority. And last not the least, before our lunch, our main logistics partner who made things happen, DP World.